why when I put on tefillin, I put them on my head last, and when removing them, I remove them first. The head tefillin. It says that when tefillin are on your head, they are in the plural. Therefore, when putting them on, you tie them around your arm, so that when you put them on your head, you have both on both of them on the body. So when they are removed first, it says here, okay, I'm just trying to, okay. Okay, that's a bit, I don't want to, I'm trying to put it in the, well, it says, okay, I remove them first so that they should not remain alone on me. If I would remove them first, if I would remove the arm tefillin first, that would seem like they would be alone on me. Okay, it's a bit. Okay, let's just continue here. Okay, there are certain days of the year when we don't put tefillin on. What days are they and why? Okay, so tefillin are the sign of the covenant made between Hashem and His people. Shabbos, holidays, and Chol HaMoed in Israel are signs of the covenant. Therefore, there's no need to add another sign, that is to put tefillin on. But in outside Israel on Chol HaMoed, people put tefillin on without a brocha. Some people don't. In Israel, you don't, and that's. But the exception is on Tisha B'Av, where you put tefillin on at mincha time, not in the morning. Okay.
Okay, thank you, man. I learned something. I never knew that in Israel during Chol HaMoed they don't put on tefillin at all.
Yeah, neither did I. Thank you.
All right, so
I actually knew that. I knew that because of Dr. Banks.
What?
I found that nobody in Israel puts the Chol HaMoed, you don't do it. I think it was Philip that told me, actually.
Okay.
I was when I was learning about it.
But I'm not seeing you. I see your cap. Can I see?
Sorry, I've got the phone down. I'm trying to charge my phone. I'll try it like this then.
Okay, that's cool.
Better.
All right, I'm closing your face. You were so sharp last night. Your mind could have cut and slaughtered the animal. So you were doing pretty well. All right, I'm going to get started.
Okay, on mute.
All right, I'll put you on mute. All right. So guys, just very quickly, the Gemara presents another challenge to Rav's ruling that despair alone affects acquisition. So they challenge Rav from the following brisa. If one stole and then another thief came and stole it from the first thief pays the twofold payment to the original owner, but the second thief pays the principal alone. Okay? Because the second thief that pays the principal alone, he actually pays it to the first thief rather than the original owner. But he does not pay the kefil payment, because we learned that it was written with respect to the kefil payment in Shemot Exodus chapter 22 verse 6, and it was stolen from the house of the man, which implies but not the house of the thief. It was the man that originally paid for it. So you don't have to pay the kefil payment for stealing a lost article from a thief. The second thief pays the principal to the first one, because the condition from the house of the man states an exclusion when you're dealing with the law of Geneva, theft, but not the law of Gazla, which is stealing. So there's an opinion that states that the second thief remains liable to pay the principal under the law of stealing, because he didn't steal it when the owner wasn't there. He held him at gunpoint. And obviously then the liability of one who steals from a thief, there's no penalty payment. That's the one opinion. The other opinion is that he pays the principal to the first thief under the laws of causative damage, groma. Why? Because when he stole the stolen article from the first thief, he thereby forced the first thief not to be able to return the article to the original owner, and therefore the thief has to come up with the money. And that wasn't the ideal either, by the way, because the ideal was that the first thief could return it in its present state to the original owner. So he still has to pay the principal. Why doesn't he get off the hook? Because he's a thief. That's why. Why does the original thief end up getting the principal back? Because just because the person's a thief, if somebody else caused him to have a loss and he couldn't return the article, that person must pay for it. Okay, so that we dealt with in depth. And then it said, if one stolen and sold the stolen animal, this is another case in the Brisa. So if one stolen and sold the stolen animal, and then another thief came and stole it from the buyer, the first thief pays the 4- and 5-fold payment, and the second thief pays the 2-fold payment. Okay, because and he pays the 2-fold payment not to the first thief but to the buyer, because a change of domain from the thief's domain to the buyer's domain has effected acquisition for the buyer. So when the second thief stole the animal from the buyer, he stole it from the house of the man who's the new owner, basically. He's therefore liable to pay for the 2-fold payment. We stated, why is there not a 4-fold and 5-fold? Yesterday, one of the propositions was, quite simply, is that when the new buyer didn't do his due diligence good enough, why is he entitled to a 4- or 5-fold payment? Then in fact, he actually bought something that was stolen. The other thing I suggested that has got more sourcing for it is that the second thief would only have to pay a 2-fold payment because he stole it from the buyer. He never sold or slaughtered it. And the 4-fold or 5-fold in the pasuk talks about as a penalty payment for slaughter or sale, because it's made a physical change. Either the thief can't get it back, so therefore there's a locational change, or slaughter is a physical change in the physiology of the animal. So either way, that invokes the 4-fold and 5-fold payment. But other than that, it would seem even for an ox or sheep, it's a 2-fold payment according to many opinions. Okay? So, again, the first thief pays the 4- or 5-fold payment to the original owner because now he's not able to give the animal back. And in that particular case, he was known as what you call it, a habitual sinner, because he stole it and then he sold it, and therefore the 4- and 5-fold payment 4- or 5-fold payment kicks in, depending what he stole, to the original owner. And the second thief pays a 2-fold payment to the new buyer because the new buyer did buy it legitimately, even though he should have done his due diligence better. So now we're dealing with another case. If one stole and then slaughtered the stolen animal, we touched on this yesterday, and then another thief came and stole the slaughtered carcass from the first thief pays the 4- or 5-fold payment, but the second thief does not pay the 2-fold payment, but only the principal alone. So the reason why the first thief pays the 4- or 5-fold payment is that pasuk, with regard to the knas, the kefil payment, is that if he slaughters or sells the animal, he's then eligible to pay the original owner the 4- or 5-fold payment. And as far as the second thief is concerned, why does he only pay the principal alone? Well, because he stole it from the thief. He never stole it from a legitimate buyer who becomes what you call the man who has the new domain of the article. So therefore, he only has to pay the principal alone. Why? Because if, for example, he has to pay the original owner, he doesn't have that portion of the original compensation to give the owner in terms of the slaughtered carcass plus the penalty payments because it was stolen from him. So the Torah is fair. Even somebody that steals, if he had money stolen from him and can't make restitution to the original owner, the second person that stole has to pay that to the original, to the first thief, because the first thief has to make compensation of to the original owner as well as the penalties. Okay, very straightforward. Now, the Brisa states, at any rate, in the middle case, if one stolen and sold the stolen animal, and then another thief came and stole it from the buyer, the first thief pays the fourfold or fivefold payment, okay? And the second thief pays the twofold payment. Now, if you want to examine that, yes, the question in the Gemara goes as follows. It says, now, when did the thief sell it? If you will say that he sold it prior to the owner's despair, then why does the second thief who stole it from the buyer pay the twofold payment? Because is there anybody who would say that the change of domain without the original owner's despair affects acquisition? Certainly not. Okay, which means what, guys? What do you think it means? Guys,
that the change of domain affects acquisition.
No, not quite. Should I repeat it? Perhaps just clearly, because it's the wording is tricky. What do you want me to do? Repeat it. Just that last sentence. Kev, what?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes, repeat it. Sorry.
Sure, no problem. So, it's saying the following. The Brisa states at any rate, in the middle case, if one stole and sold the stolen animal and then another thief came and stole it from the buyer, the first thief pays the fourfold or fivefold payment to the original owner, and the second thief pays the twofold payment. Now, when did the thief sell it? If you will say that he sold it prior to the owner's despair, then why does the second thief who stole it from the buyer pay the twofold payment? Because the reason it's saying is because if it was prior to the owner's despair, there's no acquisition. Because the question is, why? Is there anybody who would say that a change of domain without the original owner's despair affects acquisition? Certainly not. In other words, in order for the first thief to sell it to the buyer, there has to be a change of location, according to many poskim, in addition to despair, which affects acquisition. So if the original owner did not despair of getting his article back, then why would the second thief, have to pay the buyer twofold payment at all? Because it's not the buyer's. The buyer doesn't own it if the original owner hasn't given up hope of getting it. So
it can be penalized.
Correct. So rather, it's obvious, guys, that the Brisa refers to where the first thief sold it after the original owner's despair. Okay, in which case the owner's despair, in conjunction with the subsequent change of domain, affected the buyer's acquisition of the animal. So that's Rashi's clear explanation. So the thief who stole it from the buyer has stolen it from its owner and is liable to pay for the twofold payment. So again, when the original owner gives up hope, okay, don't worry about it. The first thief is paying the four or fivefold payment to the original owner. He's being sorted with compensation and believe. But at the time that he gave up, the second buyer bought it from the first thief, and therefore it becomes his because despair of the original owner affects acquisition, including a change of location from the thief to the new buyer, and those things in conjunction make it now the new buyer's ownership. And therefore, the second thief would pay the twofold payment. Now, your question is, why wouldn't he pay the fourfold or fivefold? Because as I said to you before, the four or fivefold payment only kicks in not only when there's theft, because we originally learned it was when you stole an ox or a sheep. Fivefold payment for an ox, fourfold payment for a sheep. But that's only when you sell or slaughter this sheep, because the original owner's got no way of getting it back at that point. But when the thief is not habitually sinning by selling it after he's stolen it or slaughtering it, there's only a twofold payment. The actual compensatory amount and the penalty, which is equal to the compensatory amount. Okay? So since the second thief didn't sell it, but just stole it, he's only eligible to the twofold payment. Very straightforward so far. So Now let us see. We are dealing with this brisa after the original owner's despair. And if it should enter your mind to say that despair alone effects acquisition, then why does the second thief pay only the principal? That's the question on Rav, because Rav says despair alone and rubber affects acquisition. And the question is, if that's the case, why should the second thief pay only the principal? Do you get it? Because since the first thief acquired it through the owner's despair, the second thief who stole it from him did now steal it from the new owner, the buyer, and then he should be liable to the twofold penalty. But when we read it, he said he only has to pay the principal alone. So if he only has to pay the principal alone after the owner's despair, it's a proof that despair alone doesn't affect acquisition. Is it not? So that's a proof against Rav and Rabba, it would seem. Okay. So, rather, do you not learn from this that despair alone does not affect acquisition, and therefore this poses a difficulty for Rav? So the Gemara answers, now Rava is coming to the defense, not Rav. I mean, it poses a difficulty for Rabba and Rav. But Rava said, but do you think that the brisa is worded correctly? Then consider that which is stated in the last case of the brisa. If one stole and then slaughtered the stolen animal, and then another thief came and stole it from the first thief, the first thief pays the fourfold or fivefold payment, but the second thief pays only the principal. Now, is there anyone who says that a physical change does not affect an acquisition? Certainly not, guys. So therefore, when the thief slaughtered the stolen animal, he certainly acquired it through physical change. How then can the brisa rule that the second thief is not liable to the twofold payment because he has stolen the carcass from the owner? Do you get what I'm saying? So what Rava is saying is that the wording of the brisa is incorrect. Kev, do you see why? Have I lost you guys?
No, I'm listening.
Kev, are you with me, or do you?
My mind's a bit out of all over the show today. So, but
okay, I'll watch you guys.
Saying that
he's the only one whose mind is never is always focused. I just don't
never
understand
drifts.
Anyway, that's fine. It's a good quality to have. Well done.
You're saying that the original thief is only due the principal from the second thief because he originally stole. He can't have the same rights as if he was the.
I'm saying something a little different. Is that this is a proof against Rav and Rabba, because if the thief, the first thief pays the twofold payment, but the second thief pays only the principal. So if we are dealing with the case after the owner's despair, and if it should enter your mind to say that despair affects acquisition on its own without any change of location, why does the second thief pay only the principal? Because he stole it actually from the first thief. So what we are saying is this, Kev, I stole from Gavin. I stole from Gavin. If you haven't, let me just get the wording of the original case here. Just give me a second. Okay. Let's not use me. If John stole Jonathan's a very Goyish name, so let me use the word Jonathan. If John stole from Gavin, and then Paul came and stole it from John, the first thief pays the twofold payment to the original owner, but the second thief pays only the principal alone. So the problem is that if you want to say it's before despair took place, okay, then it's a problem, because according to the one brisa, you pay the twofold payment back to the original back to the buyer. Okay, so it would have to be after there has been despair, because if the original owner did not give up hope of recovering his stolen item, the purchase never took place. Do you get that, Kev?
Because there was no despair.
Correct. So what it's saying, okay, so just remember this. Rav and Rabba both say despair on its own effects acquisition, and many of the other poskim say despair in conjunction with a change of location or a change of name effects acquisition. Obviously, a physical change does in conjunction with despair, because even a physical change on its own affects acquisition. But Rav and Rabba say that a despair affects acquisition without any other factor. So the first problem would be that it has to be a case where the original owner despaired, because otherwise the first thief could never have sold it to the buyer, because you can't sell something that's not yours. You can't sell something that's not yours. The court would never make the second thief pay the buyer on a transaction that wasn't valid, because the original owner never gave up hope of getting the article back. So since the purchase fell through because it wasn't the thief's to sell on a legal level, he might have had the physical object. Then in that case, why should the second thief pay the twofold payment to the buyer, the new buyer? So we have to say then, by logic, is that we're talking about a case in that brisa where the original owner has given up hope of getting it back. Therefore, the sale is valid when the first thief sells it to the buyer. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. When the first thief is caught, he's got a court case. I thought you'd appreciate that, pun, Kev. And in that particular case, he has to pay the 4- or 5-fold payment back, because he sold it. For selling or slaughtering a stolen article is a 4- or 5-fold payment. But the reality is the transaction did go through to the buyer because despair affects acquisition. And if that's the case, then we have to say that's the case, for the simple reason is the second thief has to pay back the new buyer a 2-fold payment, which proves he's the new owner. And he can only be the new owner if the original owner obviously gave up despair of having recovered his article. You get what I'm saying? So that's the first premise. That's the first premise, is that despair had to have affected acquisition as far as that's concerned. Then you've got an issue. Then you've got a separate issue, and that issue is as follows: is that you've got a case, a difficulty, the first case, because if you stole and then another thief came and stole it from the first thief pays the 2-fold payment, but the second thief pays only the principal. Okay, so that's a different case. We're not talking about where the thief sold it to a buyer. We're saying he had it, but another thief stole it from him. But yet the first thief pays the 2-fold payment, but the second one pays only the principal. So there we are dealing with a case after the owner's despair. But the question arises is that if it's a case after despair, why does the second thief pay only the principal? Because if the original owner despaired, the thief should technically own the article, and therefore the second thief should pay back the principal and the penalty because the original owner despaired of getting it back. Okay? So rather, do you not learn from this that despair alone does not affect acquisition? There's a difficulty posed for Rav. Okay? So now Rav is coming to the rescue, and he said, look, I think this entire brisa is not worded correctly. Because he said, if you consider the last case of the brisa, guys, the case, just to remind you, is if one stolen and slaughtered the stolen animal, and then another thief came and stole it from the first thief pays full or fivefold payment, but the second thief pays only the principal. Now, is there anyone who says that a physical change does not affect acquisition? Because if the first thief stole it and then slaughtered it, there was a physical change to the animal, and therefore it should affect acquisition for the thief that he now owns it. And all concur. So then when the thief slaughtered the stolen animal, he certainly acquired it through the physical change. So how can the Brisa rule that the second thief is not liable to the twofold payment? Because now he's stolen the carcass from its new owner. Do you get it? Because of the physical change of the animal. That's a different case to despair affecting acquisition. This is bringing into question the fact that a physical change affects acquisition. That's what Rav is saying. It seems to bring it as a problem. Kev, if I steal an animal, then I slaughter it, there's a physical change. That animal is no longer alive. Therefore, that physical change is a way that as a thief, I can acquire the animal. So therefore, when somebody steals the animal from me, then they owe me a twofold payment. Why must they pay me only a principal? Because I'm the new owner through the physical change. Whether that's fair or not, Gav, that's the rules. And I'm still paying a fivefold payment as the first thief anyway, by the way. But now that I've owned it because I made a physical change, then why can't I get back a twofold payment from the second thief? So the question is, maybe you could say that if you're a thief, you don't get rewarded for it by getting a twofold payment back. But let's just look at it on a purely logical level and leave the summation out of it. Okay? So Rav is saying that that's a problem. So therefore, when the thief slaughtered the stolen animal, he certainly acquired it through physical change. How can the Brisa then rule that the second thief is not liable to the twofold payment? Why he has stolen the carcass from its new owner, which is the thief that acquired it through the physical change of him slaughtering the animal. Rather, we must say that the text of the Brisa is corrupted, because this does not make sense, Rabbi said. And the entire Brisa refers to before the owner's original despair. So what does this mean? Is that the Brisa rules in the first case that when the second thief stole it from the first thief, he's exempt from the twofold payment because the first thief had not acquired it. And therefore, the second thief did not steal it from his owner. So what it's seeming to say here is that, and this is the part that doesn't make 100% sense to me. We learned as two separate issues that when there was a physical change that affects acquisition, or according to Rav and Rabbah, when there's a despair, it affects acquisition. So now all of a sudden, the physical change has taken place, but he's saying the reason that the second thief only pays the principal alone, even though the first thief owns it through that physical change of slaughtering the animal, is that the original owner didn't give up that animal. He didn't despair of it. And therefore, that's why only the principal is required. Okay. So that so far as we're holding. Let me just check something.
But then that's not full ownership. Then that thief is not getting full ownership. It's only getting partial ownership. The first thief.
Yeah, so it's basically, so Rabbi is saying rather we must say that the text of the Brisa is corrupted and that the entire Brisa indeed refers to before the original owner's despair. And we must switch the ruling in the Brisa's last case to the middle case, and the ruling in the Brisa's middle case to the last case. And he said you must read the Brisa of the last two cases as follows. What I'm saying is the question I have on that first Brisa is it doesn't matter if the owner despairs or not, is that the physical change we learned it affects acquisition on its own. So what would it matter?
Should be enough.
Should be enough. That's my question. And I don't want to ask it now after 120, not now, I'm a patient man. I want to stay alive, but after 120, I'm not in any rush to answer it. I'll get there. All right, I'm just making a public statement, Gav.
There's an old golf joke exactly related to that.
Really?
Yeah. So I'll tell you 1 second. So this guy, he's so excited, and this guy's in hospital, and this he has like this vision, and this angel tells him, it's unbelievable up there in heaven. You're gonna have a phenomenal time. And the guy asks the angel, like, are there golf courses there? He said, oh, they're unbelievable, better golf courses than there are on the ground. Yeah. He said, but that's the good news. But the bad news is that you're taking off first thing tomorrow morning.
That is funny. That is funny.
I don't know if I said it 100% correctly.
No,
I'm a bit tired, but
funny. I'm going to tell one last joke, golf joke, and then we're done. And that one golf joke is that the guy gets to the next world and he's putting a hole-in-one with the most impossible shots. His golf game never has an off day, and it's all great. And he's excited to be there. He's old and he's excited. First question he has when his wife dies and comes up is he bollocks her out and says, all those 20 years that you made sure my heart was working well with the no sodium, the no salt, the healthy foods. I was miserable with my quality of life because I was living on leeks and prunes. Why don't you just give me a healthy life down there, and then when I rocked up here, I'd get a hole-in-one. You know, there are a lot of golf jokes. I think you only appreciate it when you know how difficult the game is. Just as a matter of interest,
no, that was good. I got it.
Just as a matter of interest, I need to just read how Rav interprets the last two cases of the price.
Let's see what he said. So he's saying this is what it should have.
So this is what it should say. If one stole and then sold the stolen animal, and another thief came and stole the carcass from the buyer, we talk about the stolen, not the carcass. Sorry. If one stole and then sold the stolen animal, and another thief came and stole it from the buyer, the first thief pays the fourfold or fivefold payment, but the second thief pays only the principal. Okay? For a change of domain without the original owner's despair does not effect acquisition. So the animal never belonged to the buyer, and the thief who stole it from him is therefore exempt for the kefil payment because he didn't steal it from the original owner. That's according to Rashi. Okay? Explanation of Rav's reinterpretation of the Brisa. Okay? Now, if one stole and then slaughtered the stolen animal, and another thief came and stole the carcass from the first thief pays the 4 or 5-fold payment, and the second thief pays the 2-fold payment. For the first thief has already acquired it through physical change. So Rava is actually saying that the original interpretation means that physical change is not enough. And Gavin here, he's agreeing it's enough. Because he says the reason why it's enough that the second thief pays the 2-fold payment is that the first thief acquired it when he made the physical change, irrespective of whether the original owner despaired or not, because it was strong enough. But in the first case, when there was only the principal paid, a change of location to the buyer is not strong enough without the owner's despair. And that then is also a proof to say that you'd need a change of location in addition to despair. Okay, so the second thief had stolen the carcass from its owner. The first thief and pays in the 2-fold penalty because that physical slaughtering is now made at the first thief. Okay, so just let me just see how long we've got left. We've got enough time. Quickly, guys. So the Gemara rejects Rava's insistence that the Brisa text is necessarily corrupted and that its ruling must therefore be reversed. Rav Papa said, actually, you do not have to switch the Brisa's rulings, for you can explain the Brisa in its present form. You can say that the Brisa's ruling in the last case, okay, that the second thief who stole it from the first thief had slaughtered it is exempt from the 2-fold payment, actually, okay, because it's the opinion of Beis Shammai who says that a stolen article that undergoes a physical change remains in its place. In other words, it remains the possession of the original owner and is not acquired from the thief, because even though he might have acquired it in the sense that he can't give it back to the original owner because it's dead. He doesn't acquire the benefit of it because any act through thievery or halachic breakage is not rewarded. So therefore, he has to pay back money. He owns it in the sense he can't give back Betsy alive, so he owns it in that case, but he still has to pay 4 or 5-fold payments. But the second thief never has to pay the 2-fold payment from the first thief because the first thief didn't own it, because you can't break halacha and the law and expect to benefit from it, according to Beis Shammai. So he's certainly only going to get the principal back, even if he owns it through the physical change. This means you can't give Betsy back alive. That's all it means. So basically, the first thief is stuck with a carcass. He has to sell it to recover some of his losses. You get what I'm saying? So that's not the fault of the first thief, because he could pay back the carcass as well as some penalties. But if it was stolen from him, it's not fair that either. So the second thief has to return what he stole in terms of the principle, which is fair, because each person that stole has to make restitution, because it's not just a legal issue, Gavin, it's a teshuva issue. Okay. So, all right, guys, I think we can end off on that note. We covered quite a bit.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
I still think that we keep saying that the thief should never benefit, but when he makes an improvement to that animal, of course he's benefiting, because it's a change of ownership. He becomes the owner now. So if he goes and steals 1,000 sheep from all around the world, in theory, all around the country, he's got himself a little farm and he hasn't paid 1 cent for it. And then he improves on it and he doesn't have to give it back. He keeps the improvement amount. He just has to give back providing he's never caught.
Okay, well, Gav, this is the issue. There's 4 issues to what you're saying. Issue number 1.
No, even if he's caught, I think it's fine.
No. Hang on a second. Issue number 1 is that he never improved the animal. I've got a pet. You killed my pet. How did you improve my pet? How?
No, not that one. When you fed it steroids, that's what I'm talking about.
It like became from a lamb to a ram.
No.
Or comes from a lamb to a ram. Exactly.
Yeah, but that issue that was brought up is that whenever the thief overindulges in feed, he doesn't have to. He can deduct what he spent on food that was in excess of the norm. And deduct which was in excess of the norm. In other words, when he's caught, obviously if you're never caught, you don't pay in this world, but you pay.
No. I mean when he's caught. Sorry, I just got confused at the end.
So when he's caught, what it means is that he has to pay if he's fed the animal excessively well. He gets that amount of animal feed deducted off his debt. Sure, he does. So as far as the physical changes. Kev, just give me 1 second. As far as the physical change.
Okay, so that was it. Sorry, okay, so I forgot what the penalty was. So the penalty, not the penalty, what the reduction was. The reduction is just purely the additional amount you paid for the steroids or whatever.
Yeah, and in terms